tiny bit slower than what I just did, but it's that's the kind of speed.
Okay. Is it about like?
Oh, that's the time for
Show me,
the
yeah.
other piece, but this actually might be close. It's actually probably a little slower, a tiny bit slower.
Okay, it's not too slow.
No, I know. But it's short. It's only 3 times.
Nothing goes better slower.
No, it's true. It's true. It's more air and more shaping and more everything when it's slower.
Yeah, adagio for strings, I think, would be. That's a great. Oh.
So I'll do a thing. I'll do the intro. I'll go da na 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 na. And you go show me. So I'm doing those 4 measures or some fraction of them anyway, like in the intro. Okay.
I'm ready when you are.
Is this on? Is this on? It's okay. I don't need it for anything. There was no one here. I just did it.
Good evening. My name is Lori Shearer. I'm a member of the Beth Israel Board of Directors and the chair of the Holocaust Task Force. I'm grateful to be in community with you today as we commemorate Yom HaShoah. Well before October 7th and the current riots on college campuses, our Jewish community had observed a steady and concerning rise in anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic violence right here in San Diego and across our country. Rabbi Navarez saw a need to have a task force at Beth Israel dedicated to bearing witness to the Holocaust and reimagining our Yom HaShoah commemorations. Last year, we had the honor and privilege of dedicating our Czech Holocaust Torah scroll. Our beloved Susan Hutchinson created a beautiful Torah cover for it, and the task force will continue to educate our community about Beth Israel's obligations as custodians of this special Torah, described as a silent survivor of the Shoah. Many thanks to Ronnie and Eric Udoff for taking great care to travel with our Czech Torah scroll to Fullerton for the 60th anniversary of the Memorial Scrolls Trust. The Holocaust Task Force is also focused on equipping Jewish youth to discuss the Holocaust and prepare them for what they might face in the community, such as Holocaust denial. And lastly, we are committed to educating non-Jewish youth and adults about the Holocaust by building interfaith relationships and programs. Statistics reveal that only half of Americans 18 to 29 believe the Holocaust really happened, and only a third of young people know what Auschwitz is. We will remain hopeful and steadfast in our work to advocate, educate, and bear witness. Thank you for being here this evening.
I, along with Lori and our task force and our incredible musicians, Andy and Jeff, and our Zimria Chorale, and our youth and teen choir here to lead this evening, so happy that you showed up in presence, both here and we know our large community online, as we are compelled to reflect deeply and never forget the unfathomable horrors of the Holocaust. We come together not only to remember the 6 million Jewish souls mercilessly taken from us, but also to honor the indomitable spirit of those who survived the darkest chapter in human history. In the wake of recent events, particularly the heinous October 7th massacres, our duty, our responsibility, our mandate is to remember and honor the survivors becomes even more critical. These atrocities serve as stark reminders of the enduring presence of hatred and bigotry in our world. Yet, in the face of such adversity, the resilience and courage of Holocaust survivors stand as beacons of hope and inspiration. As we pay tribute to the survivors today and hear the precious sacred story of Kindertransport survivor and congregant Robert Fryer, let us not only commemorate their unimaginable suffering, but also celebrate their strength, their resilience, and their unwavering determination to ensure that the atrocities of the past are never, ever forgotten. May their stories serve as a powerful reminder of the human capacity for both unspeakable evil and extraordinary, extraordinary courage. Together, let us reaffirm our commitment to combating hatred and intolerance in all its forms, and pledging to honor the memories of the victims by striving to build and continue to build a world of compassion, of understanding, and of peace. Our task force is made up of incredible individuals, many of who are here today with us. I'd like to call those task force members that are here: Lori Shearer, John Lefter, Bob McNeese, Danny Siklick, Matt Fauci, to join us on the bima. I'd also like to call upon Robert and his family to join us on the bima as we prepare to light our 6 memorial candles. And I would also ask if there are any family members of survivors that are here, I would invite you to come and join us on the bima as well. Is Ronnie Udoff here as well? Okay, just wanted to make sure.
We light this candle in memory of the 6 million Jewish victims of the Holocaust. Helpless infants, children, and teenagers who were cut down like young trees before their time, before they had a chance to experience life. Too many mothers and fathers who were cruelly separated from their children and led to lonely deaths. We say responsibly, we shall not forget.
We light this candle in memory of the 5 million additional people killed by the Nazis, not Jews, but also victims of Hitler's hate. Political opponents, priests and ministers, trade union leaders, communists, gypsies, homosexuals, the mentally and physically disabled. Too many. Too many. We say responsibly, we shall not forget.
We light this candle in honor of Frant Abbas, age 14, who wrote, "I am a Jew and will be a Jew forever. Even if I should die from hunger, never will I submit. I will always fight for my people on my honor. I will never be ashamed of them. I give my word. I am proud of my people, how dignified they are. Even if I am suppressed, I will always come back to life. We shall not forget."
We light this candle in memory of all the heroes of the resistance who fought on behalf of the Jews, those who rose up in acts of armed resistance in the ghettos, in the death camps, and in the forests, those who smuggled food and medicine at risk of their own lives, those righteous Gentiles who resisted the evil plans of the Nazis by hiding and protecting their Jewish neighbors and even strangers. So few against so many, so important their courage. We shall not forget.
We light this candle in memory of Reverend Martin Niemöller, who's a pastor in the German Confessioning Church, who spent 7 years in a concentration camp. He wrote the following words: "First they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. We shall not forget."
We light this candle with the hope and the promise that genocide shall never happen again, and anti-Semitism will be extinguished. This candle is in honor of all righteous individuals who stand up and speak out against injustice and murder. This day, we each promise to make hatred and persecution strangers to our community. We shall not forget. Wiesel. Oh, sorry. Okay, next. Yeah. Next are from Elie Wiesel, Holocaust survivor and Nobel laureate. How does one mourn for 6 million people who died? How many candles does one light? How many prayers does one recite? Do we know how to remember the victims, their solitude, their helplessness? They left us without a trace, and we are their trace. We tell these stories, perhaps because we know that not to listen, not to want to know, would lead you to indifference. And indifference is never the answer. Whoever hates, hates everybody. Whoever kills, kills more than his victims.
Each of Us Has a Name by Israeli poet Zelda. Each of us has a name given by God and given by our parents. Each of us has a name given by our stature and our smile and given by what we wear. Each of us has a name given by the mountains and given by our walls. Each of us has a name given by the stars and given by our neighbors. Each of us has a name given by our sins and given by our longing. Each of us has a name given by our enemies and given by our love. Each of us has a name given by our celebrations and given by our work. Each of us has a name given by the seasons and given by our blindness. Each of us has a name given by the sea and given by our death.
butterfly was the last one. Butterflies don't live in me. In a moment, I'd like to call upon Susan Hutchison. Many of you in our community know Susan. She has been working in our clergy suite for 24 years and is a gift to so many, everybody she encounters each and every day. When we noted last year that we were going to acquire our first official permanent loan Holocaust scroll from Memorial Scroll Trust, Susan was inspired and volunteered to make this incredible Torah cover that you see on your screens and that you see in front of you to house our beautiful Holocaust scroll from the Czech Republic. And she's not one for speaking publicly. So this is a gift to us that she's going to spend a few moments to share her vision and why she chose to endeavor into this incredible sacred project. So Susan, please join us on the bima.
Thank you, Rabbi, and good evening to all of you. I am so honored and privileged to be part of such a vibrant Jewish community. Oh my gosh. I just saw someone who's very dear to me in the audience. I have to admit to you that I was a rather reluctant person when it came to accepting the honor of making the scroll, the Torah cover for our precious Torah scroll. I didn't think I was the right person, not being Jewish, but then Rabbi Navarez didn't let me go for 24 hours before he and Leslie said, "You are the right person for this." And I have come to believe that is so. It has been such an honor and a transformative experience for me to create the Torah cover. Our Torah is a powerful and physical connection to that time in history when the survival of the Jewish people was on a precipice. Our Holocaust Torah is a survivor. It was scribed during the 19th century in Czechoslovakia. It was shared by the villagers of Pesek and Strakonec. The scroll was confiscated by the Nazis when they purged Czech synagogues and communities. Our Torah, along with many others, languished in the Jewish Museum in Prague during World War II. After the communist takeover of Czechoslovakia in 1948, the scrolls and other religious objects were moved and warehoused in a damp and ruined synagogue outside of Prague, where they were left uncared for and deteriorating. In the 1960s, the communist government was in need of foreign currency. A British philanthropist, Ralph Yablon, became aware of the Torah scrolls' plight. He funded their purchase and the cost of their transportation in 1964 to the Westminster Synagogue in London. He was also one of the founding members of the Westminster Synagogue. These Torah scrolls came under the administration of the Memorial Scroll Trust, which has taken on the task of repairing, preserving, and distributing the scrolls to Jewish communities and synagogues throughout the world, with the goal of remembering those who perished in the Holocaust and to remind people of all faiths of what we have in common rather than what divides us. It's been a year since the sacred scroll made its journey to Beth Israel. Carefully packaged for transportation, it arrived here without a cover. I was given broad guidelines by Rabbi Navarez and Leslie Mills with the caveat that they had the final approval of the design that I would submit to them. Their guidelines were, it needs to be a contemporary design. It needs to coordinate color with the other Torahs in the Ark, and it needs to honor the 6 million Jews and the 5 million other people who perished in the Holocaust. I was a little overwhelmed about the thought of trying to honor 11 million people. And I thought, how does one navigate the darkness of human atrocities and find a message of light? How does one develop images using fabric, colors, shapes, patterns, and textures that will honor their memory? I found inspiration and meaning from my time here at Beth Israel. I realized that every day I'm here, I'm immersed in the rhythm of the Jewish year and worship cycle, the tenets of Judaism, life cycle events, traditions, and this wonderful, caring, and gracious community. It was my attendance, though, at a Kever Avot service at El Camino Cemetery with my very special friend Murray Rogo that sparked the idea for the creation and design of the center panel for the Torah cover. After the Kever Avot service, Murray said, I want to visit the gravestone of my wife Ruth and my granddaughter Rachel. When we got to their grave sites, he pulled out a little bag that had Jerusalem stones in it, and he placed a stone by each of their names. This was a poignant, loving moment of remembrance. It was this realization to me that each individual that perished in the Holocaust was denied a Jewish burial, honoring their life, and to let them know that they are not forgotten, that their life was precious, they were loved, and they were part of a community. So I took it to mean that if I honor each person individually with a pictorial fabric gravestone that would help all of us remember each person rather than just the sheer numbers, because everyone that perished was precious. I think I will stand next to my what I decided to do, and I didn't realize that Torahs came in different sizes. This one's really long and skinny. Each of the squares is reflective of the gravestone that was not placed for each survivor, each person that perished in the Holocaust. The circle is an homage to their life, whether it was short or long, and then the stone button that I sewed on it represents to us and to them that they will not be forgotten and we will remember them. There are 6 rows and columns in a gray-blue to signify the 6 million that perished. There is a dark band that runs through and connects all of the gravestones, which represents the Kriya ribbons that were never torn. And then the 2 lighter bands represent the essence and the light that each person brought to this world, even though they perished. And then the bottom band is a batik fabric that reminded me of stones, and then stones encased with other stones represent the individual, the family, the synagogue, cities, villages, and the whole world. Everything is interconnected to the top and bottom band, and to me, the bottom and top band represent God's love for the Jewish people, God's embrace of the Jewish people, and the joy of the Torah. And I also designed it so that the cover can come off. It's Velcroed on, so. And there's a secret compartment in the lining. I used all of the scraps of the leftover material, and I put in 2 little pockets so that our Holocaust group can put in messages, and I put in one that honors the names of the 2 communities in Czechoslovakia that the Torah scroll came from. And in conclusion, I want to say that this Torah cover is my gift to all of you and to how much you mean to me. And you are my Beth Israel family. We are the custodians of this sacred and precious Torah. We're the memory keepers of those who were lost. We are the witnesses to the experience of those who survived. And we are committed to building a better world for future generations. And I survived this, so. Oh my God. All right.
is a monument by Holocaust survivor and poet Yala Corwin. In the old country, our bards sang Jewish sorrows, joys of the rich and poor, of tailors, peddlers, scholars, mothers, fathers, children, lovers, sages, and fools. Their hearths extinguished, ancient shtetls vanished. Only songs remain of the multi-petaled world, each petal a promise, each petal a voice. Do not mourn them in graveyards. Their ashes mantle the earth, billowing clouds, swirling eddies of rivers, dwell in rustling of trees, whirl in gusts of wind. Do not enshrine them in stone. Let them breathe in your breath. Time grinds stone to dust, but breath is a cradle of song. Song is a monument. Song is forever.
This afternoon we have an incredible opportunity to bear witness. We know that in these moments that as the years pass, the memories of our first-person Shoah experiences, to hear the memories and of survivors becomes ever lost. And so to be in witness to those who've traversed what can only be described as unimaginable is a blessing in bearing witness. Robert Fire, our beloved congregant, was born in Vienna in 1933, and as the Shoah began, and Hitler invaded Austria, his parents did what many did at the time. They wanted to just save their son. And they did that by sending him away on what's known as the Kindertransport. The Kindertransport, which translates as the children's transport, was a humanitarian rescue that saved about 10,000 Jewish children from Austria and Germany and Czechoslovakia by illegally sending them to Great Britain. And it was started by then British Home Secretary Sir Samuel Hoare, who, in response to the violence of Kristallnacht, sped up the immigration process by issuing travel documents on the basis of group lists rather than individual applications. And the first Kindertransport was from Vienna on December 10th in 1938. And 5-year-old Robert was on that train and that transport. We are here to hear his story and bear witness. And after that, we have the blessed opportunity for Sonia Israel, who is known to many, congregant here and at Beth El, perhaps connected to Rabbi Gimbel over there, but also is a second-generation Shoah survivor and is going to be offering some Q&A with Robert. And so I delight in calling upon Robert to join us on the Bima.
Thank you, Rabbi. I'm doing this in honor of my soulmate and best friend, Anita Lana, who sadly passed away May 15th last year. My story begins when I was born in 1933. That was also the year that Hitler became Chancellor of Germany, legally. As a side, in 1934, he authorized the building of Dachau concentration camp, which later on in the story I'll tell you that my father was interned there. When I was 4 years old, that was in 1938. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, because I had a problem. And by the way, Susan, that's a wonderful, beautiful cover. You did a tremendous job. I had a little problem hearing her, so I'm going to talk closer to the microphone. When I was 4 years old, the Anschluss happened. This is the annexation of Austria by Germany. That I found out that Hitler actually tried to annex Austria in 1934, but the Austrian military were against that, and he wasn't successful. But in 1938, in March of 1938, he annexed Austria, and there was a vote that 99% of the Austrians were for it. Now, you have to say that it was an open election, which means that everybody knew how everybody else voted, so there was some votes of fear. I remember my first memory, being 4 years old, was when Hitler came into Vienna. And I was very excited because it was a parade. And I'm not sure if this is a true memory or a false memory. But I was excited as a 4-year-old. When I was 5, we had Kristallnacht, which is the night of the shattered glass. And that's where my story really begins, because my father, with a lot of Jewish men, was rounded up and sent to Dachau. My mother and my aunt, my father's sister, went to see Eichmann, who was head of the Jewish office in Vienna at the time, and they told him and showed him that my father had been in World War I, and he was a decorated veteran. And they managed to get him out after 3 weeks. But the 3 weeks, I saw pictures of him. My father was pretty skinny, not like me. And he looked awful after 3 weeks. And what they did, Dachau is right near Munich. And they put him on a train, and they sent him back to Vienna, and they kept the train very warm. And they were told by the Jewish agencies, what you have to do is make sure that you slowly but surely get into the habit of not being in warm climates, because they had been deprived so much by the Nazis in Dachau. Well, anyway, when my father got out, he had to report to the SA every week, and he was told that he had to leave the country. He had a permit to go to Shanghai, but instead he went to Palestine illegally, and he was interned in Palestine. My mother was left with her father, my grandfather, and myself. And the first thing she did, she went to her father and said, would you take care of Robert so I can join my husband? And I'm still hyper, but I was very hyper as a kid. So my grandfather said, if you leave Robert with me, he'll be the death of me. That was basically how my life was saved, because my mother, I don't know how she got me on the kinder transport, but she managed to get me on. And Rabbi, I have to correct you, I was not on the first transport. I was on the June 15th transport, which the first transport was in 1938 in December, and the last transport was September 1st, when the war broke out, and I was on June 15th. All I remember, and this is a false memory, because it didn't happen, but I thought it happened. When we arrived in Holland, the train left Vienna, went to Munich, went to Holland, the Hook of Holland, and then we took a boat to Harwich. But what I remember was that when we arrived in Holland, in some train station, I didn't know it was Holland, my grandmother and my uncle came and gave me chocolate, hot chocolate and fruit. When I read up about the kinder transport, I learned that senior women took care of the refugees when they came and gave them hot chocolate. So that my grandmother was not there, because my grandmother with my father's brother, who was a lawyer, unfortunately escaped Vienna and went to Warsaw, and they perished in the Warsaw ghetto. So when I arrived in England, I don't remember the ship or any of that, but I remember arriving in Liverpool Station. We arrived into a theater, and I was very excited because I thought we were going to watch a movie. But it was really only a place where they were gathering the refugees. And my cousin Selma came, who had left Vienna earlier. I read that the British government allowed 20,000 Jews to immigrate before the Kindertransport. They were mostly intellectuals and well-educated, and so she came and greeted me, and then they put me on the Blue Express train to Edinburgh, and that's why I speak with a wee bit of a Scottish accent. I was told by my mother that I was going on a vacation. Well, it was a very long vacation, I have to admit. When they put me on the train, it was the Midnight Express. They asked this friendly doctor to watch over me. And I remember very vividly, that I cried the whole way. I promised myself after that I would never cry again until I reached 70. And then I cry at commercials. Some of them are pretty bad too. I arrived in Scotland, and my first encounter was with the Foleys. They adopted me. Basically, they were Christian Scientists, Mr. and Mrs. Foley, and they had a son named Kevin, who was a year older than I was. And the very first thing they did when we got off the train, they put me on a double-decker bus. Now in Vienna, there are no double-decker buses. And I was scared like you can't believe. I thought the thing was going to topple over. But I lived with them for about 6 to 8 months. I learned to ride a bicycle. They lived in the outskirts of Edinburgh in a small house. But to me, it was a very big house, because in Vienna, we lived in an apartment building, and the facilities were out in the hallway. So the only thing that I remember is that we had the weekly baths. Mr. Foley filled the water in the bathtub, which we didn't have in Vienna, by the way. Filled the water with bathtub. He bathed. Then Mrs. Foley bathed. Then Kevin Foley bathed. And then Robert Fire bathed. Now, when Robert Fire got into the water, it was black, but it was warm. It was very nice. I don't know why I didn't stay there. I wasn't privy to that information. But from there, I went to an elderly lady for 3 weeks, because they were trying to figure out what they were going to do with me, I guess. And from there, I went to live with a furniture manufacturer, Mr. and Mrs. Korn, that had sons in the military. I only knew of Gordon, who was in the North African campaign. But I found out many years later that they had 3 other sons that I never met. But they had a player piano, and I loved it there. And when I went back to Scotland, they lived at 71 Spottiswoode Street. And I took my wife, my late wife, and we went to see that, and we walked into the alcove and into the backyard, and I said, I used to play there. And I had very fond memories. After 2 years about, so at that point I was about 7 or 8, they transferred me to Linlithgow. It was a Christian hostel. I was the only Jew, but it was, that's where I encountered my first Passover. We just finished Passover, and the Jewish agency thought that I was going to be lost to Judaism forever, being in this Christian hostel. So they arranged for me to stay at the chief rabbi's house of Edinburgh. His name was Cohen, also was not related to Mr. and Mrs. Cohen, the furniture manufacturers. And I remember sitting there with this long table, the rabbi at the head of the table, little Robert, 7 or 8 years old, sitting there, starving, and not understanding why they're doing all this praying. And the rabbi's wife sat next to me, and she felt very sorry for me. But so she got me next day, she took me and got me some Pesadika candy, and I was appeased. The hostel where I stayed in Linlithgow had a policy. By the way, the people that were staying there were children of working class Scots. They were all Presbyterian, I imagine, and we celebrated Christmas and all of the Christian holidays. And their parents would come out once a week to visit their kids. And they had a policy that they would not allow the kids to go back home to their homes because they could get diseases. Well, I proved the fact, because when I came back from Passover, I had the mumps. And I infected all of the kids. And they said, you see, it just proves that our policy is one thing I learned at the Passover. I learned Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin. So when I came back to the hostel, I taught all of the kids Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin. And today there are, if they're still alive, a lot of 90-year-olds, Presbyterians, that run around saying Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin. So after my stay at Linlithgow, I went to Castle Douglas, Kirkcudbright, which is south of Scotland, and this was a Jewish hostel, all boys, and I have very fond memories. I can tell you a story. It's a little amusing. We used to go up to our dormitories. There were about 15 or 20 of us. And there were some steps leading up to the dormitories, and there was a window that had access to a pantry. And the pantry had a lot of dried fruit. And Robert is not very tall now, but I was very short then. Very, very short. I managed to crawl into the window off the stairs, climbed down a whole bunch of shelves, and stuffed my pockets with raisins, prunes, apricots, and dried fruit. And then climb up the shelving, get out of the window, and we would have feasts every night. One day, I was stuffing my pockets with these dried fruits, and all of a sudden I hear a key in the lock. And the matron that was in charge of the kitchen walks in and says, "What are you doing here?" And I really didn't have a very good answer. So that's one of the sides in that. From there, I went to Glasgow on Hill Street, which was also a Jewish hostel. And it's, if anyone of you have ever been to Glasgow, it's right near Sauchiehall Street, which is a central part of Glasgow. And I stayed there for 6 months, and they would close the place in summer. And so I was sent to a farm school in just the outskirts of Edinburgh in Bonnyrigg. And I liked it. I'm not sure that I did that much work on the farm, but I ate a lot of gooseberries and plums. So they asked me, would you like to stay here? And I said, yes, I would. So I stayed there, and this was 1944. And then I stayed there for 2 years, and my first language was German, but I forgot German completely because I spoke English only. And my mother tongue is essentially English with a Scottish accent. So when in 1945, and you notice how I say 45, a lot of kids, by the way, I was the youngest in the hostel. I was, at that time, I was 11. And in 1945, a lot of kids came from concentration camps, the true Holocaust survivors. And they were teenagers. They had tattoos on their arms with their numbers. And that's where I learned Yiddish, because they didn't speak any English. And we made fun of their accents, frankly. And I learned Yiddish. And at one point, the townies from Bonnyrigg came up. Polton House, by the way, now is a paper mill, because I went there with my wife, and I found out it's called Polton Mill. But it was a big mansion with a long driveway, and I lost my train of thought for a second. Yeah, so the kids from the village came up the hill towards the mansion, and they were trying to start a fight. Well, the kids, I was 11, 12, and all these kids that came from concentration camps weren't going to have any of this crap anymore. And they beat the living daylights out of these kids. As far as anti-Semitism was concerned, I saw some of it in Bonnyrigg because we were a Jewish hostel. And when I went to school, primary school in Bonnyrigg, one kid threw a stone at me. But the kid was not completely mentally there. But generally, I got along very well. And then I went to secondary school in Les Wade in 6th grade. And I can tell you how I would exchange my matzahs at Passover with the kids in school by telling them that they're water biscuits and they could give me some sandwiches. That's very blasphemous, but that's the way it was. In 1946, my mother, by the way, my father left for Palestine, and my mother managed to go to Palestine too. She went on the Danube to the Black Sea, and she was stranded on a ship with 1,000 other people, refugees, because of the ice. And they finally arrived in Haifa, and she was interned. My father had been interned when he came, but he left, he was out by then. And so I was very fortunate that of the 9,600 children that were on kinder transport, most of them, not 100% were Jewish, most of them never saw their parents again. So it's very sad. And especially the ones, I belong to the Kinder Transport Association, and I was interviewed by the Kinder Transport in 1998, and you can see that on YouTube if you want to check it out. I arrived in Palestine in 1946, one of the few people that came legitimately, legally. We went, a little story, when I left Scotland, I went to Liverpool because the ship that I sailed on was called the SS Samdak, S-A-M-D-A-K. It was a Liberty ship, and it had 6 passengers. I was one of them. And we arrived in Haifa, and that's where I have fear of injections, because when I had never had any fear of being vaccinated before, but when I got off the ship, I went to the Jewish agency, and they gave me an injection, and I was just talking, no problem. And then they gave me a smallpox injection, and I fainted. And that's the first time I lost control. And I am morbidly afraid of losing control. For some reason, my grandkids and my kids don't like to be vaccinated either. Although they do get vaccinated. So my first encounter with my parents, my mother, there were 6 of us on the ship. Oh yes, when we were in Liverpool, there was a German lady that was taking care of me. And we went on the bus to the shipyard. And the Liverpudlian conductor was talking to me, and I was talking to him. And I couldn't understand his Liverpudlian accent. He couldn't understand my Scottish accent. And the only one that could translate what we were talking about was the German lady that spoke with the German accent. And the ship sailed from Liverpool, went to Beirut, and I had a fest on the fruit that I saw, because after being going through the war, we didn't see too much fruit in Scotland. I lived in Palestine. I came to Palestine in 1946, just before my bar mitzvah, and I met Yossi, one of the first friends of mine, who unfortunately passed away last year. And the way I met him, I was standing at the corner in Kiryat. We lived in Kiryat Bialik. Kiryat Bialik is a suburb of Haifa, and it's between Haifa and Akko. And it's known as a German colony because they all spoke German. That was the lingua franca there. And I'm standing at the corner, and this kid with freckles comes up to me. He says, "My name's Yossi, can I come to your bar mitzvah?" And we've been friends ever since. That's about it. I lived in Israel. I was involved with communications when I was 15 during the independence of Israel, which is now 76 years. And it's terrible what's happening now. I was in the Air Force, in the ground crew, for 5 years. And after that, I came to the States. I have 7 grandchildren and 4 honorary grandchildren. the 7 grandchildren. 3 of them are here. Would you like to stand up? Aaron, Alex, and Anna. And Andrea is my daughter. And Alan is her husband. Andrea runs the dance program for the city of San Diego. And she's a Juilliard graduate. And I'm very proud of her. I have a daughter who lives in Seattle, lives in Kirkland actually, and Vashon. She has 2 girls. And I have a son that lives in Menlo Park who has a daughter that's in school right now. She's going to be finishing her veterinarian school next year. And a son who is at UC Irvine doing his stage, his residency, yeah. He's an ENT specialist. And my honorary grandchildren are Anita's 2 granddaughters, and Lauren and Rachel. And we have a honorary grandchildren in Brazil. We had Sergio Lifshitz came to stay with us when he was 16. He is now 60. And his 2 children, Luisa and Victor, are also call me Grandpa. So I think the question and answer will find some more details. Thank you very much for listening. You want to say?
Robert, thank you. Thank you for sharing your incredible story. It is so important for all of us to hear your story and the stories of other survivors so that we understand our past and our history. I have to add that listening to your story, we have a lot in common. My grandfather was in Dachau, as your father was. I had family in Kiryat Motzkin, right next to Kiryat Bialik.
Kiryat Motzkin.
Kiryat Motzkin, and Lochomei Getaot, up the street from...
Where?
Lochomei HaGetaot, the kibbutz, up the street from Kiryat Bialik. And I also cry at commercials, so we have a lot in common.
How long was your grandpa in Dachau?
We don't know for sure. We think he was shot in the forests around Dachau. We believe that's where it all happened, but I don't know how long he was there. He came from Lithuania.
Okay.
Yeah. So many questions. The whole time you were in Scotland, did you know if your parents were still alive? Did you know anything about them?
Yes. My parents sent me aerograms, which airmail.
Right. The blue ones that folded.
Yeah,
right?
folded many ways. And I wouldn't respond. I was kind of ornery in that way. So I remember once it was in Castle Douglas, Kirkcudbright. And by the way, Kirkcudbright is, I challenge anyone in here to be able to spell Kirkcudbright. I was in class. I was probably in 4th grade, and they called me out and said, "There's a letter here from your mother that says, just sign that you're alive." So yeah, I knew my parents were alive.
You did know that. And so did the families that you were staying with correspond with them? How did they know as you were moved from family to family?
I have no
You don't
idea.
know
I think
how
the
they
Jewish
knew.
agency was involved.
So they
but I
probably did, yeah.
really, Kultus gemeint. That's-
I've heard it said that you think of the war often, but that you've never let it hold you back, and that you're known as someone with a very positive outlook. Can you tell us a little bit about how that positive outlook helped you, both when you had to leave your mother and then in your time in Scotland as you were moved from family to family?
Well, I don't remember leaving my mother. I don't. As a matter of fact, one of the things when I came, after I had fainted and then I went to the agency, I was sitting on a bench with Carl, who was another one of the 6 passengers, because it was a Liberty ship, 6 passengers. And I look back, and there was a corridor behind me, and I look back, and I see my mother. I recognize my mother. But I didn't wave. I just looked back, and I said to Carl, "Oh, by the way, that's my mother." And she went into a office to find out where I was. And then she came, and she stood in front of me. And my mother wasn't very demonstrative either. So she said in German, "Robert." And I kind of blushed and like this. And we didn't hug, we didn't kiss, we didn't do anything. And then she picked me up, and we went down, and my father was much more demonstrative than my mother. He hugged me and kissed me, and I felt very embarrassed. And then we went on the bus to the Kiryah, because from Hadar, you're familiar with the bus stop. This lady walks in, and I get up to give her my seat, because that's what we'd be taught in Scotland. And my mother pulls me down. And, well, I learned you don't get up for ladies.
I hope you've unlearned that.
And then we arrived at Kiryat Bialik, Kiryat Motzkin, you know, the 2 cafe houses there. And they bought me ice cream, and all was good.
You forgave them.
But I don't a positive attitude. I have what you would call an abandonment complex. That's kind of maybe self. I call my kids a lot, like every day. And too much, I think.
Are you in? No, sorry.
No, go on.
Are you in touch with any of the boys from the hostels, or Kevin from your first
No.
and any of the families?
No, I did see in the newspaper, this was many years ago, about 15 years ago, I saw that one of the kids that had come from the concentration camp, they had an expose about him, and he was in Polton House. I said, "Oh, Polton House, I was at Polton House." And he probably would know me because I was the youngest in the hostel. So I called his wife. He didn't pick up. And he lived out on Long Island. And I told her that, I was in Polton House. Could he give me a call? He never did. So I figured I shouldn't bother him. And then there was another one that was, Fried was his name, Max Fried. And I looked him up. This was maybe 30 years ago. And I knew him in Polton House. And he worked in the jewelry industry, and he was a very Orthodox Jew. And he didn't seem like he wanted to meet me, so.
Probably hard times that they didn't want to remember.
Yeah. He was I was the youngest at Polton House, so he was about 2-3 years older than I was.
As you got older and probably started internalizing all that had happened in Europe and to you in Scotland and Great Britain, and in your life. What was it like to suddenly be in Israel, reunited with your parents? You told us how the initial reunion was, and then serving in the defense of the Jewish state as a member of the Air Force.
Well, that was a metamorphosis. When I first came to Palestine, my friends were the British Tommies, because I had just come from Scotland. I spoke English, they spoke English, and I would say probably there was tinges of anti-Semitism in my thought process. I remember once walking down the street in Kiryat Chaim, by the way, we were walking, and with my mother, and a British Tommy came across from us, and his beret fell down. So I picked it up, and my mother said his head should have flown off. And I went into a big diatribe, anti-Jewish diatribe. I was 13. I changed and so I didn't want to learn Hebrew. And they put me in a home in Kfar Saba. And I thought I was bad, but the boys that were there were terrible. I learned my lesson. I promised I'd be a good boy, and the rest is history. I became an ardent Zionist, and being in Israel is really, you feel like you own the world. At least when I was there. And now it's so sad that's what's happening.
And we'll get to that part in a minute, but what brought you to the United States?
I came to study. I finished. I didn't want to. I finished 8th grade, and then my mother felt that education was not that important. Having a trade was more important than education, because there were a lot of doctors and engineers and lawyers that worked as Schwarzarbeiter, black workers, like ordinary workers, because they didn't speak the language. So she got me a job as a Zuckerbaker, which is a pastry cook. And I wanted to be a mechanic. And all my friends were, not all of my friends, but a couple of my friends were mechanics, and they wouldn't have to get up early in the morning to take the bus to Haifa, go across the Arab Wadi Rushmiya, and make yeast dough early in the morning. They could take care of their machines at a later date. So I think so, but I still wanted to be a mechanic. So then I volunteered when I was 2 weeks before my 17th birthday. I joined the Air Force and went to ground crew training, and I had to sign up for 5 years. At that time, Israel, if I had stayed another year, I would have gone to compulsory service for 2 years. But this way I stayed for 5 years. And eventually I became the hangar chief of the British hangar. The British hangar had Spitfires and Meteors. And Ezra Weitzman was our wing commander. And I'll just tell you one interesting story. In 1956, during the Sinai campaign, I got out of the service in 55. In 56, I was called back into the reserves. And he got all of us together in the hangar, and he said, in 10 minutes, the French Air Force will be landing here. I don't want you guys stealing anything from them.
So Robert, as a Shoah survivor, and you are a survivor, even though you said those boys from the concentration camps were the real survivors, you are still a survivor. So as a Shoah survivor, and given October 7th and all the events since then, what do you want our young people to know and to remember from your experience or from the Shoah in general?
Well, I think I would address not the young people as much as the older people, that it is very important that you tell your stories to the young people, because I am very sad that I did not ask my mother how she got me on the kinder transport, what she had to do to get to the Black Sea. We never talked about these things. And I have, at least I think you can tell me if I'm wrong, Andrea, but I think I've pretty much communicated my story to them ad nauseum. So I think the young people, the parents and grandparents should take the initiative to communicate about their lives, not necessarily Holocaust, but their lives in general, how they grew up and what motivated them to be successful like they all are.
Well, thank you. Thank you again for sharing your story with all of us. Thank you for all you have done and continuing to help us to never forget.
Thank you very much.
Opening of the buds, and in the rebirth of spring, hear them laugh, we hear them cry, we hear them sing. We remember them, we remember them, for as long as they live, these who shall live.
The shining of the sun and in the warmth of summer, at the rustling of the leaves and the beauty of the fall,
at the start of the year and again at its end. Think of family, think of our friends.
For
when we are weary and in need of strength, when we are lost and sick at heart.
When we have joy we crave to share, we remember how much they care.
We have decisions to make. They help us think what's at stake. When we are seeking comfort and love, they still embrace us from above. For they are a part of us. They'll always be a part of us as we remember them. As we remember them. As we remember them.
A poem by Thelka Stoll, a German Jew who was murdered in Auschwitz in 1943. Today I saw 1,000 disturbed people. Today I saw 1,000 Jews wandering into oblivion, into the gray of the cold morning dew, the condemned, leaving behind what once was their life. They stepped through the gates glancing back as they left everything outside, their homeland, their belongings, and their happiness. Where will you be led? Where ends your path? They only know this: the destination is called barbed wire. And what awaits you is misery, torture, and distress, suffering, hunger, disease, for many soon to follow, death. I search your eyes with a brother's look, expecting deepest grief in this misfortune. Instead of despair, one sees a deep, deep strength. A bearing and composure glows in their eyes. One sees a burning will to live, sees faith and courage, and sees in some faces a smile, strong and good. I am strongly moved to recognize the spirit of the people, selected for suffering that will be overcome, that lifts itself out of misery and need, banishment, forced labor, and imprisonment, with unbroken strength. Today I saw 1,000 people with disturbed faces, and I saw in the gray of the morning the rays of everlasting light.
We rise together.
Yiskadal, v'yiskadash, Shemei Rabbah. Be'alema tivrach Yerusei, v'yamelich malchusei, b'chayecho u'v'yomecho ויספר ויסרומם ויסנסה ויסהדר ויסעלה ויסעלה שמי דקודשו
As we turn to singing Hatikvah, the international anthem of the Jewish people, following singing Hatikvah, we will walk in silence to our Kriya sculpture. We invite you to take a candle on your way out in the foyer and by the Kriya sculpture. We will light them together as we remember them. We invite you to continue after Hatikvah. I know I already said it, but I'm going to say it again. That we walk out in silence so that the next prayers, the next words that we will offer together is Kaddish Yatom. We join together.